Good morning, Mr. Chairman. For the record, my name is Rusty Black, and I represent the 12th Senate District. Senate Bill 982 would repeal the annual testing requirement for hydrants and instead allow for scheduled testing. Fire districts recommend that testing is done every 5 years and is built into their insurance. Senate Bill 982 would put this testing on that 5-year schedule instead of being required every year. I'd be happy to answer your question, but there are people behind me that know exactly when. I think there was somehow this group was cut out of some something that happened previously, and we're trying to make a fix to that.
Thank you, Senator. I don't have any questions for you.
I appreciate that.
Are there any witnesses testifying in favor of the bill? Whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Good morning, Senator. I appreciate the opportunity to speak on this bill, and I appreciate very much Senator Black being willing to bring this. As he mentioned, current law requires this specialized static pressure testing of flow rate to take place annually. This bill, if you read the very last paragraph of the law, it literally only applies to small cities such as Rolla, such as West Plains. Yeah, exactly. What we're asking for is an allowance for our cities, our member cities, to be able to do this testing as they would care to schedule this. So, did I say? I'm Elizabeth Smith with Missouri Public Utility Alliance. Sorry. Anyway, as an example, it costs West Plains when they use a contractor to do this kind of testing, it costs West Plains annually over $200,000 a year. Macon, $95,000 a year, $182,000 a year for Monet, and on and on. I'm happy to answer any questions, sir.
Well, thank you. You mentioned Rolla. I sure like Rolla.
I know you do.
Right.
So do I.
I don't have any questions for you. Thank you for your testimony. Are there any witnesses testifying in favor of the bill? Are any witnesses to testify in opposition? For informational purposes only. Senator, do you have any closing remarks?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Right. We're going to be in a holding pattern until we get somebody here.
Go ahead and go to Representative Brown.
Yeah, Representative Brown, are you ready? Go ahead and you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Chris Brown, District 16, out of the Northland of Kansas City. I want to thank you for time and opportunity to introduce HB2062. This is a bill you've heard multiple times, so I'm not going to belabor the point. I'll make my remarks very brief. Obviously, this bill originates from the COVID era where the federal government basically put a moratorium on evictions for a little over a year. I submit that was an illegal appropriation of private property and certainly an infringement upon contract rights. I am not a constitutional scholar, but I do believe the 5th and the 14th Amendments give private property owners some protections in terms of some due process and just compensation if the federal government, or any government for that matter, is going to come in and basically take over control of their property. This bill would not preclude the governor from still, obviously with his emergency authority, from being able to declare an emergency and maybe put a pause on evictions. But I think the governor doing that is going to be a much more consistent and targeted approach rather than our municipalities, going, one here, one there, kind of a very inconsistent approach to doing this. So in the spirit and the motto of virtue and brevity and your prior knowledge on this bill, because again, this has been in front of you multiple times, I will stop and open up myself for questions.
Thank you, Representative. Are there any questions? Seeing none, are there any witnesses testifying in favor of the bill? Please come forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and member of the committee. My name is Jason Zamkis, registered lobbyist on behalf of the Missouri Association of Realtors. Just like to go on record in support. Obviously, the decision to impose an eviction moratorium has the real potential for infringement upon constitutionally protected property rights. And we believe that those decisions are best made at the highest levels of government, not piecemeal from one small town to another. And so with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions for the witness? Seeing none, are there any other witnesses testifying in favor of the bill? In opposition? I want to remind the witnesses to leave a form so your testimony can be made into record. Whenever you're ready.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Jeremy LaFavor appearing today on behalf of Empower Missouri. We've testified on this bill before in the House and the Senate. We'd like to see language included that allows the governor to call a state of emergency, and then that would trigger the allowance of mayors or local governments to establish eviction policies that work for their communities. Well, I certainly appreciate and understand my friends from the Realtors Association, the desire to have a statewide thing. It's our desire to allow local folks to address things that they see are needs and let the governor worry about statewide issues.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions for the witness? Seeing none, are there any other witnesses testify in opposition? Any witnesses testify for informational purposes only? Representative, do you have any closing remarks?
I do not. Thank you for your support.
Thank you. Senator Gannon, I'm going to turn the gavel over to you.
Okay.
I've got a couple bills here to present.
We're going to first hear from Senator Brown, Senate Bill 1453. 1453. And you may begin when you're ready.
Whoops. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Good morning. For the record, I'm Senator Justin Brown, representing the 16th District. Today, I'm here to present Senate Bill 1453. This is kind of a bittersweet bill for me. It's an honor, but it's also one of those things you don't want to have to do. What this bill would do, it would rename a portion of Highway 63 in Rolla, basically from Lanning Lane, which is the front entrance of Missouri S&T, to State Highway BB or 10th Street, and it would rename that street to the Dr. Dan Brown Memorial Highway. As you all know, Dr. Dan Brown was my father. He served 2 years in the House, 8 years in the Senate. He was able to accomplish a lot up here with not only with legislation, but he was Appropriations Chairman for 4 years and was on Appropriations the entire 8-year tenure of his service. We still operate a business that he started in Rolla. He was a veterinarian by trade. He practiced veterinary medicine for 45 years. We still have Brown Veterinary Clinic in operation, and I just think it would be appropriate to what he served his constituents, the 16th District, and the community in the surrounding area, that it's appropriate to do this. I don't have any witnesses, I don't think, but I would entertain any questions. If I do have any witnesses and they're in opposition to it, may God rest their soul.
Only you would say that.
I want to add one thing, too. I would ask the committee to consider this as a consent bill. I hope that we can do that. And if we do, we need to vote on that today because the consent calendar deadline is this week. So,
Okay.
and we'll have to wait till we get a quorum for that.
Yes. I did not know your father personally, but I only heard great things about him, and I find this very fitting, very touching.
I will probably never be able to live up to his legacy and how he conducted himself up here compared to the way I do. But I will say this. I have a hell of a lot more hair than he did and a lot better looking. So.
Okay. Let's, then, anybody in support? Opposite? Okay, support.
Cody Atkinson. I'll be the first to admit I didn't see this bill until this morning, but everything I've gathered about your father seems to be that he was a good and decent man, and I've made my sentiment toward veterinarians in this state and across the country well known. I've got nothing but respect for him. It would be wonderful to see something commemorate a good and decent man who was also a veterinarian and a staple of the community.
Thank you for your comments, and fill out a witness form. Anybody else in support?
Richard McIntosh here on behalf of myself. We worked with his dad. He was a joy to work with. He was a straight shooter. You didn't have to ever question what he meant and what he said. And his yes was yes and his no was no. And he did a great job of pulling people together, trying to get them to compromise, certainly on different budget items. And I think this is entirely appropriate, and I'm glad you brought the bill.
Next in support?
Madam Chairman, members of the committee, Nikki Strong here on behalf of myself in support of this bill. I knew Senator Brown very well. You've got big shoes to fill, buddy, but he was a wonderful Senate Appropriations Chairman, a wonderful senator, and I think that there's nothing more appropriate and fitting for him than this, and I can only imagine his comment that he would make knowing that this was happening. Anyway.
There you go. Thank you. Anybody else in support?
Me too.
And I hate to ask it, but opposition, I don't think that's going to happen. Informational purposes. Everybody's scared. Informational purposes only. Okay, seeing none. We will now move to Senate Bill 938. Senator Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the committee, good morning. Again, for the record, I'm Senator Justin Brown, representing the 16th District. I'm here today to present Senate Bill 938. Currently, if the owner of personal property in a self-storage facility defaults on rent or other charges and the operator of the facility chooses to sell such personal property to satisfy a lien, or notice of sale must be made in the classified section of a newspaper. What Senate Bill 938 will allow, it allows the seller to advertise in any commercially reasonable manner. The advertisement will be deemed commercially reasonable if at least 3 independent bidders attend or view the sale at the time and place advertised. I appreciate the opportunity to present this bill to the committee. I believe there are experts here behind me to testify, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, any questions for the bill handler? Seeing none, first in support. Can you turn your mic on?
I can.
Okay.
Good morning. My name is Chris Holloway. I'm the current president of the Missouri Self-Storage Owners Association, and I'm here again to show our support for this bill. Most self-storage owners are mom-and-pop facilities like myself, and we are all too aware that we're just one lawsuit away from losing our business. So we take the auction process very seriously. So much so that for the last 15 years I've been going to Missouri conferences. We've spent an entire afternoon going over the legal process of auctioning a unit with an attorney. That being said, we do everything we can to avoid auctioning the unit, as we always lose. And thanks to the TV show Storage Wars, there is a common misconception on what these units have, which is usually fishing poles and mattresses. To avoid auction, we will go so far as to call them and tell them to simply come pick up their things. I had a customer once, we're going to call him Dennis, who got very far behind on his rent. He came in monthly to pay, but was usually less cash than the monthly total that he was owed. And it naturally pushed him further and further behind. He was never going to catch up, and I was never going to get the large amount of money that he owed me. And because he kept contact with me, I simply called him and said, come get your stuff. Because nobody wins when we go to auction. I can cite many examples of this, but I'm sure you get the point, as we've been here many years having this conversation. My When people go to auction, non-payment is usually half the story. Prior to this comes months of phone calls, letters, texts, calls to alternative contacts, and certified letters. They are well aware of the issue long before any auction proceedings take place, and if they were going to call a relative or a friend to bail them out, it would have happened by now. So for the opposition to imply that a classified newspaper ad is going to miraculously inspire a family member to come and bail them out is a stretch only taken by someone who has no idea what's going on in our industry. 15 years I've been in this business, and not one person has shown up because they saw an ad. The ad, as you are well aware by now, is to ensure a fair sale of at least 3 bidders. This was written up when we did live auctions on the site. We no longer do live auctions. We use websites similar to eBay, which draw far more than the required 3 bidders. After hearing the opposition's stance on the lack of internet options for rural storage owners who need the paper to communicate to the public, I went to our members at our last conference and asked them if this was true. The response I received was that of the opposite. Some of our members' closest newspaper was an hour's drive away, and yet their internet was streaming just fine. Having the newspaper ad as a requirement in the having the newspaper ad as a requirement in the current era is unnecessary part of an already painful and costly process and leaves a weak link in the chain of self-storage owners' day-to-day business. Is there any questions?
Any questions from the committee?
Thank
Seeing
you for your
none.
time.
Thank you. Next witness in support of the bill.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Randy Scher representing the American Self-Storage Association. I think the previous witness outlined what the storage facilities are facing when it comes to those lien sales. In a survey of one of the largest operators in Missouri, just to give you some numbers, they had 300 unit lien sales. They averaged 300 units lien sales a year. On those, the sale price is usually averages between $160 and $170 per unit, when in fact that they owe an average of $325. Now that's where they are already behind. So there's that average loss of $150 to $160 per unit sale, not including the auctioneer, if you have that, as well as the advertising. And as the previous witness indicated, getting buyers out of the newspaper ads just doesn't work. And what's happened in the industry now is most of the storage facilities are going online, and they're using auction companies that have thousands of bidders in their index, and that's where they get their buyers. So this is an extra cost. It doesn't bring in any bidders, and I think you might hear from the opposition that it's important to have that in the newspaper so that the family members might know what's going on with Aunt Lily's goods. Well, that doesn't work that way, because virtually nobody puts the name in the ad for privacy reasons. So there's no way to identify unless that individual has that unit number and knows what's going on. And if they had that, they're probably listed on the lease agreement that they put on family members as a second contact. So I'll stop there. Be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Next in support of the bill. Seeing nobody else, in opposition. First witness.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm Mark Mawson with the Missouri Press Association, representing the more than 200 newspapers that publish in this state. We're against Senate Bill 938. Why should these public notices be in the newspaper? This bill undercuts all 4 principles underlying the publication of public notices in community newspapers across the state. Notices should be published by an independent party so that the government is not watching itself, or the storage company is not watching itself. Notices must be archivable. The internet does not provide a reliable archival history. They must be accessible. The lack of high-speed internet access in areas of this state is well documented. I anecdotally have a place in Benton County, Missouri on the Ozarks. And I'm telling you, there's no high-speed internet access there. When I go there, I'm off the grid completely, counter to what was just presented. They must also be verifiable. Public notices in newspapers are verified by the publisher of the newspaper as to both the content and the date of the publication. Most public notices require sworn affidavits that public notices were published. Newspaper storage ads help identify whose property is being sold, in addition to attracting potential bidders. I don't know how many people go to Joe's self-storage to see whose storage locker is going up for sale. I do want to mention mopublicnotices.com. In 2008, the Missouri Press Association started a website in which every single public notice is published on this website for free, at no charge to the individual placing the public notice. It's searchable by county, by city, and by category. It's text-based, and we have more than 500,000 page views last year. And again, it's free. The vendor that provides this service to us also does it for 17 other states. So it's a very verifiable website. In closing, I'll say this. Newspapers are inherently superior for internet for public notices because reading a newspaper is a serendipitous process. We find things in newspapers we weren't expecting to see. On the internet, we search for specific information and ignore everything else. This bill would save money for the self-storage companies by reducing transparency for everyone else. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you, sir. Next in opposition. First in informational purposes only. Seeing none. Senator, do you have any closing comments on Senate Bill 938?
Thank you for taking the time and allowing me to present this bill.
Okay, and now we will hear Senate Bill 937 from Senator Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Again, for the record, Senator Justin Brown, representing the 16th District. I'm here today to present Senate Bill 937. Senate Bill 937 prevents a political subdivision from adopting or enforcing a regulation that prohibits the operation of a pet shop that is licensed in this state. Nothing in this bill would prohibit the enforcement of any applicable building and zoning laws or relevant inspections are required by ordinance or law. No dealer or pet shop shall purchase from any entity who is not licensed to sell and handle animals in accordance with current law or has multiple or repeat critical violations or direct violations of state or federal law within the last 3 years. A pet shop must disclose to the purchaser of the dog breeder's and dealer's name and address. Any pet shop that knowingly violates provisions of this bill would be guilty of a Class A misdemeanor. I believe there are experts in this room, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for the handler? Seeing none, first witness in support.
Good morning. My name is Elizabeth Kunzelman. I am the Vice President of Legislative Affairs for Petland. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Petland is a family business. My father opened the first one in 1967 because he loves pets and wanted to connect people with healthy animals. We have 7 stores in Missouri and have been doing business for a combined 71 years. These are all independently owned, private, small businesses. We're not a big corporation. And these stores alone in Missouri represent more than 250 employees and a significant financial investment in the state. Because our business involves animals, it's no surprise that animal rights groups routinely attack our company. Unfortunately, local municipalities across the country are being heavily influenced by such organizations who are pushing communities to pass retail pet sale bans, thereby closing local businesses who were properly licensed, have done nothing wrong, and did not violate any state laws or local ordinances. We don't want to see that happen here. We have seen firsthand what happens when these bans go into place. We have seen local bans shut down successful, responsible businesses in several states, including Texas, Florida, and Illinois. These are states that have had stores in their communities for 15 to 20 years, and effectively their business was worthless. This bill is not about whether or not you believe pet stores should sell puppies. This is about the right to do commerce in the state. This bill is about protecting small business owners who acquire all of the correct permits and licensing through the state to conduct their business. In Arkansas last year, the state passed almost the same bill you have in front of you because of exactly the same issue. Pet stores are already licensed by the state, and that's where it should stay. While I'm here to talk about protecting small businesses, I do want to point out a couple of things that our opponents often bring up. Our buying standard, we have someone that will speak to that today, but we do buy from USDA licensed breeders with no direct violations for the previous 2 years. And we are also supporting Purdue University in their Canine Care Certified program, which has gold star level standards for commercial kennels. Our consumer financing policy follows all state regulations and was updated in 2021 to prohibit pet leasing, easy pay, and any predatory lending. And finally, HSUS has continued to say that Florida Governor Ron DeSantis vetoed such a bill. That is incorrect. He vetoed a local ordinance bill in 2022 because it was too broad. Nothing about dogs, pets, puppies was mentioned in that bill. It was brought back in 2023, and DeSantis signed it. Local businesses are the lifeblood of our communities, providing jobs, goods, and services that are essential to our economy. We believe responsible independent businesses should be given the right to conduct business in a free market economy. Let the laws of supply and demand work in this state. Thank you.
Any questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you, ma'am. Next in support.
Today's my birthday. My eyes went bad, so turned 45. Hello, I am Samantha Boyle. This is my husband, Ryan Boyle. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of Senate Bill 937. We're the owners of Petland Joplin in Missouri. We also have 2 additional locations in Northwest Arkansas and in Fayetteville, Arkansas. Petland is a small family business that has operated in Joplin since 2006. We have owned that location since 2017. Our 4 children work in our stores in addition to 75 hardworking employees. Our Petland family is trained to meet and deliver the highest canine care standards for our customers. At Petland, we strive to provide an environment with the highest standards of animal care. We visit every single breeder prior to purchasing from them and thoroughly inspect their records. Our breeders are all licensed with the United States Department of Agriculture, the Missouri State Department of Agriculture, the Health Department, and are responsible professional hobby breeders. We have been working to improve breeding standards for over 35 years collectively. We do not purchase any animals from breeders with any inspection report violations for a 2-year period. Our breeders must have a clean inspection report and operate with high breeding standards to sell to our stores. You will hear animal rights activists share that they want to shut down puppy mills. However, pet sale bans do the opposite. By banning the sale of puppies from regulated and licensed stores, more people will be forced to find unregulated breeders who sell at flea markets and on online websites. You'll hear these same people talk about local control. Like many Missourians, I know local government plays an important role in serving the needs closest to people. However, a small business owner in Missouri should never be faced with a targeted, politically motivated city council intent on closing their business without cause, without giving that owner a chance to speak on their behalf, like what happened to us in Arkansas. That's the threat many high-performing, high-standard pet stores around the country face against animal rights activists lying about our breeding and sourcing standards. There's good pet stores and bad pet stores, good breeders and bad breeders. It's time to protect what's good about the pet care industry and put the bad actors out of business. In closing, purchasing an animal from Petland is a special experience, and our customers rely on us to have a regulated, licensed, and inspected store to come to and to purchase a pet that meets their family's particular needs. To ensure we protect animal welfare and our customers, we request you please support Senate Bill 937. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you. Any questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Next in support.
Madam Chair, I might have you remind the witnesses to leave a witness form
Okay, I'll do that.
so they
Yes.
can get their testimony in public record.
Yes.
Hello, thank you for the opportunity to talk to you today. I'm here in support of Senate Bill 937. My name is Chris Heiskell, lifelong Missouri resident. I live in Joplin, Missouri. I work for Petland Corporate as the breeder relations manager. Previous to that, I worked for a puppy distributor in Goodman, Missouri for 17 years. So combined, I have 23 years experience of working directly with breeders all across the Midwest. In this role that I have currently, I have the opportunity to visit many breeders, and I have visited hundreds of facilities across the whole Midwestern part of the United States. As with any field, there are good and there are bad, and I've seen both. So Petland is committed to working with the best of the best, and to that end, we have made a major focus on growing canine care certification amongst all the breeders that we're working with. We also network with some of the other distributor partners that have their breeders that they work with, and they all have liaisons that have been trained by Purdue in what the standards consist of and what the breeders must do, and they are working with their breeder groups to get them to get canine care certifications as well. So I have visited over 100 kennels that are canine care certified, and the results of their standards when they're put into practice are obvious. They're great kennels, and it's got to be seen to be believed. The dogs are great. So I've been working primarily for the last 3.5 years, meeting with these breeders at different state organizations. Like this last weekend, MPBA had their state organization. I was there. We had a booth. I shared our customers' expectations from what breeders they want to see from breeders, and our commitment to growing canine care certification. This is happening all across the country in all the states, and there's been remarkable growth. We now have 215 fully certified breeders that are meeting the canine care certification standards. There are 12 kennels right now that are pending their audit, and 352 that have the standards and are working through the process of getting their certification. Petland has always been committed to improving standards for the animals, and we will continue to do so. We see Petland as part of the solution, not part of the problem, and we are asking for your support of Senate Bill 937.
Thank you. Any questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you. Next in support. First in opposition. Please state your name and fill out a witness form.
Madam Chair, Bob Baker, representing the Missouri Alliance for Animal Legislation. And I guess our question is, what is the need for this legislation? If every pet store was acquiring their animals from reputable breeders, they were taking good care of them in their pet stores, providing good veterinary care for the animals while they're in their pet stores, reimbursing consumers who they might have unknowingly sold a sick animal and reimbursing them for the vet care costs, not engaging in predatory lending practices, there would be no need for this legislation because no county is going to take on a reputable business. I think one of the concerns is that they might do it and come in and a city or a county might just on a whim ban the sale of dogs in pet stores because some people don't like that concept. But the easy solution for that is to just add language into this bill that states that a local government would have to show a rational basis for a governmental interest for consumer protection, public health, and the welfare of the animals. And this would take away that concern about whim, but it would also give local government the authority to regulate these facilities. Right now, we're relying on state protections, and unfortunately, there are inadequate state protections. Even in this legislation, they put in a little tiny fraction of protection by saying you can't buy from breeders that were repeatedly affecting the health of their animal, the livelihood of the animal. You can't buy from that. And even our Missouri Pet Breeders Association, which represents the commercial dog breeding in the state, threw a fit over that little tiny fraction of protection. They wanted to make sure that the worst of their industry could still sell their dogs. And it was taken out of the companion bill in the House over that. So there should be a wake-up call that we have a lot to do to improve conditions in the commercial dog breeding industry in this state when the industry leaders are fighting anything that would even hurt a bad breeder from continuing to selling their animals no matter the violations. The only protection we have right now as far as acquisition at the state level is that they have to be licensed either by the State Department of Agriculture or by USDA. And yet those regulations are bare minimum for the most part. I would call them more survival standards and not really humane standards of care. And the problem is even when they violate those survival standards, it takes years to get these bad breeders out of business. We had 2 closed down last year. Mincy was one and Kowalski. It took 5 years before they were shut down, and they were continually selling dogs to pet stores in spite of numerous and multiple serious violations. We had another one that was even worse than that. 11 years ago, she was reported for serious violations, and we've been fighting to get her closed down since 2011, and she was finally closed down just this past year. But in all that time period, she was still allowed to sell to anyone that she wanted to, pet stores or anything. So what I'm saying is we don't have good state protections right now. We don't have good state protections against predatory lending practices. You know, one of the problems is people go into buy a puppy, they get attached to it. I mean, this isn't like buying a toaster. You know, they put the little puppy in your arms, you go in the playroom, you play with it, and you fall in love with it, and then you want to pay for it. And then they say, well, it's $3,500 or $4,000 for that puppy. So you go, oh my God, and I love this poor dog. And they said, oh, we'll just take out a loan. One of the companies that were providing loans to these pet sellers, their average interest was anywhere between 130 to 180%. One guy tells his story. He went in, bought a dog at a pet store, bought it on impulse, fell in love with it, so he offered to pay the exorbitant price for it. He was paying 189% interest. The animal got sick. He encountered thousands of dollars in vet bills, and the animal died, and he still is having to pay off this loan for 189%. So again, if they had protections against predatory lending practices, that would be a different story, but we don't. We don't even have protections against these defective warranties. Again, these are not toasters. If you bought a toaster and it didn't work, you'd be going back to the store demanding your money back. But this is a dog you bought, you fall in love with it, it gets sick, you take it to the veterinarian. That's your first thought, is getting that animal better and treating it and bringing it back to health. Then you might think, oh my gosh, I had to go back to the pet store and ask them for my refund, or even not a refund, but at least to pay for the cost of the veterinary care for the dog. And what's the response? Oh, you didn't come back soon enough. Our warranty's expired already. Or they'll say, oh, you didn't take it to our veterinarian. We only reimburse for our veterinarian. Or even the worst case scenario, again, when you nurse that animal back to health, you really become attached to it. Your family becomes attached to it. So you take it back for the vet bills, and they said, well, fine, give us the dog back, and we'll give you a new dog instead. I mean, these are not good protections for the consumers, and this is why we do need for the county to step in and take action when there are bad apples. I'm not saying they're all bad apples, but they need that. I mean, if this bill passes, you're telling pet stores they have full immunity from everything and anything. And when they talk about wanting good standards, even at the state level, because they know they don't like any local control whatsoever. So they said, let the states do it. But what happens when the states do step up and pass good laws to protect their consumers? 7 states passed laws requiring their pet stores to only buy from breeders that they could not buy from breeders that had a certain threshold level of violations documented on the USDA inspection report. Common sense rule. If they're requiring from responsible breeders, they'd have no problems. You know what happened?
You need to wrap it up, sir.
Okay. Well, just to break it short, the pet breeders went berserk over those state regulations that common sense. They lobbied USDA so that USDA would not even issue the inspection reports to the public, which was totally illegal. I had to sue USDA for another action they took to protect these bad apples. They fought vigorously against any good state protections. So this is why we need, and let me just summarize. I can give you the language that's needed to fix this whole problem. All you have to do is put in there that you cannot prohibit or overly regulate unless such ordinance or regulation bears or has a rational basis grounded in a legitimate governmental interest for public health, animal welfare, or consumer protection. Then the good pet stores are protected, and yet it gives the counties and municipalities the authority to go after the bad ones.
Any
Thank you.
questions for the witness? Seeing none. Oh, yes, Senator.
And my apologies for, I'm double booked, I'm in commerce at the same time. So you talked about that that the standards right now in place have to do with our State Department of Agriculture and then
Yes.
USDA, and those are kind of considered like basic survival standards. Are there other entities out there that have higher standards?
Sure. Well, not governmental, but there are voluntary programs. I mean, what was mentioned earlier was this Canine Care Certified program, which is encouraging, but I just have to stress it's a voluntary program. So whether it's no obligation that the pet stores do that. And if the good ones do comply and they have the CCC certification, that would be great, and it would give a county no reason to go after them. But we need the county to have that authority to go after the bad apples. There's bad apples in everything, and the other thing is I don't want to get into it, but we don't even know what the standards of care are under the Canine Care Certified program, and it's a voluntary thing, and the inspections are done announced in advance, which I have concerns about. But it is encouraging that there is some progress in that direction, but I still believe that the counties need that authority. And one of the things, if I can just add on to, one of the problems with this legislation.
Go ahead, finish this statement, and then that's it.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
The problem is it says you can't even have any regulations if it affects their business. And every regulation affects a business to a certain degree, and it doesn't stipulate to what extent. And this is a real concern to us, that any regulation that the county passes to try to control these things is going to be ruled out of law.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none. Next in opposition. State your name and fill out a witness form, please.
Cody Atkinson, State Director for the Humane Society of the United States. I'll keep mine brief. No need to echo what Bob had already explained. I do believe we need to maintain local control of our businesses. If a diner were to sell burgers that were getting people sick, they'd be able to shut them down. I think if the same thing were happening with dogs or cats being sold at a store, that the county or city would be able to step in and take appropriate action at the behest of that citizenry. Thank you.
Any questions? Seeing none. Next in opposition.
Richard McIntosh, I'm here on behalf of the Animal Defense Legal Legislative Fund. This bill is the wrong solution to the wrong problem. And I'm empathetic to what happened to them in Fayetteville as a business owner myself. But what they described, the situation described, was a taking. And I provided some language that we could draft, put in draft form. They would give them some protections against the taking. They would have a 90-day comment period when they applied for a business license. If no one complains, and the city gives the permit afterwards, and then they try and take it later, unless there was false information given in the permit process, they would have a cause of action and seek monetary relief for any investment they made in the building. And I think that would solve the problem. We do support small breeders, and I provided a couple letters from small breeders. They would not sell to a place like Petland. They want to sell directly to this consumer. They want you to come directly to their facilities, see where the dogs are at, see where the kennels are, meet the mom, meet the dad. You can see the conditions that they were raised in. And that is, in our opinion, the best way to sell dogs to the public. The other thing is I did, to be fair, and I told Brian Baker, Representative Baker, that I would do this. I did go to the Petland in Lake St. Louis to see what the experience was like. The dog was on sale for $3,500. I asked if they had run genetics, and there was no genetics test run. I asked where the dog came from. They gave me the breeder's name on a sheet, but they couldn't tell me anything about the breeder. There was a little, you would have expected more, and $3,500 for a dog is pretty expensive. In regards to the canine care, to be fair, I was encouraged to hear they had standards. I went out to try and find what those standards are. You cannot get a list of those standards. You have to sign a non-disclosure. So it sounds good to have the standards, but I don't know what the standards are. I would think that if you were promoting that you had a standard, you would want everybody to know what they were. So
Okay.
the last thing I would say is if you're going to pull something out of local control and bring it to the state level, then we at the state now own that, and we have to regulate that. If we're going to do that, I think there's some additional language that would be put in statute that would mirror what they say they do, which I would think they would not have a problem doing since they say they do it, and we could have those protections there.
Thank you. Any questions for the witness? Seeing none. Next in opposition. Next in opposition. Seeing none. Informational purposes only. Senator, closing remarks.
Oh, you bet I do. You know, I carried this bill last year, and I just want to clarify something. This is not about dog breeders or puppy mills. This bill, all it does is it doesn't allow a local municipality to arbitrarily close a pet store if they haven't done anything wrong. So please, as members of the committee, keep that in mind. This is not anything to do with dog breeders or puppy mills. It's about local businesses. And if, you know, where's that stop? If they can do this with pet land, and it's not just about one business, it could be any of them. But if they haven't done anything wrong and they decide that, you know, they have no evidence that they're abusing their animals or running their business the wrong way, they could, what stops them from being able to do that in any other business? So just keep that in mind. Madam Chair, members of the committee, I really appreciate the opportunity to present this bill.
Thank you. And I'm going to turn the gavel back over to you.
All right. What? Yeah. All right. We do have a quorum now. Ashley, will you please call the roll?
Senators Brown,
Here.
Moon, Gannon,
Aye.
Koenig, McCreary, Razor, Shore.
We have a quorum. We are going to move into executive session. I move to go into executive session. I have a second. We are in executive session. I now move that Senate Bill 911 be brought before the committee. Do I have a second? I have a second. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Ayes have it. The bill is before the committee. I move that Senate Bill 911 be voted out of committee. Do pass. Do I have a second? I have a second. Senate Bill 911, this was Senator Ben Brown. He presented this bill a couple of weeks ago. Preempts any local laws, ordinances, or regulations enacted by a political subdivision of the state regulating the sale of tobacco products, alternative nicotine products, or vapor products. Is there any discussion on that? Senator Moon.
There was some testimony during the committee hearing to change to not impede local efforts. Do you know if that was entertained?
We did not receive anything on that.
Okay. All right.
We don't have a substitute for it.
All right.
Senator McCreary.
Building on my colleagues' questions, there was also talk about making sure that there would be local control allowed as far as sale of tobacco products, et cetera, to people under 21. Was that discussed in?
We have not received any information regarding a substitute at all.
Okay. Well, I think I'm going to vote no on it at this
Okay.
point, only because we've received feedback, and I'd like to see what that looks like.
Okay.
So, thank you.
Senator Shore.
Briefly, just going to comment. I think that this is an issue that is plaguing some of our counties and some of our cities that we have to address. I'd like to see what the substitute's going to look like. I'm going to vote in favor of moving this further along and not killing it today. But I think some of the parties know that I will have an amendment once it hits the floor.
Right. And so to be clear, at this point, if we vote this out, the substitute would be on the floor. It will no longer be in committee. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, ask you call the roll to vote Senate Bill 911 out. Committee do pass.
Senators Brown,
Aye.
Moon, Gannon,
Aye.
Koenig, McCreary,
No.
Razor, Shore.
By your vote of 4 to 2, the motion carries. I now move that Senate Bill 1353 be brought before the committee. Do I have a second? I have a second. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The bill is before the committee. I move that Senate Bill 1353 be voted out of committee. Do pass. Do I have a second? I have a second. This is a bill that I presented 2 weeks ago. Senate Bill 1353 streamlines a process in which counties can request jail reimbursements. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, I shall call the roll to vote. Senate Bill 1353 out of committee. Do pass.
Senators Brown,
Aye.
Moon, Gannon, Koenig, McCreary, Razor, Shore.
By your vote of 6-0, motion carries. I now move that Senate Bill 1453 be brought before the committee. Do I have a second? I have a second. All those in favor say aye. All opposed, no. Ayes have it. The bill is before the committee. This is a bill that I just presented today to name the portion of 63 Highway in Rolla, the Dr. Dan Brown Memorial Highway. There will be the reason why we're voting on this today, I really don't like to do this normally, but I would like to vote this out consent, and we have to do that today because this is the last week that we can vote consent bills out. So with that said, I move that Senate Bill 1453 be voted out of committee. Do pass. I have a second. Is there any discussion on that? Seeing none, I shall call the roll to vote Senate Bill 1453 out of committee. Do pass.
Senators Brown,
Aye.
Moon, Gannon,
Aye. Aye.
Koenig, McCreary, Razor, Shore. 6-0.
By your vote of 6-0, the motion carries, and I want to thank the committee for doing that. I now move that Senate Bill 1453 be voted out of committee. Do pass consent. Do I have a second? I have a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, I shall call the roll to vote Senate Bill 1453 out of committee. Do pass consent.
Senators Brown,
Aye.
Moon, Gannon, Koenig, McCreary, Razor, Shore.
By your vote of 6-0, motion carries. I now move that we move out of executive session. I have a second. I have a second. No further business coming before the committee. Meeting adjourned.